Yeah, I have a friend whose point I disagree with, but he said the best way to watch a 10K is to watch it again and again for every person in the field and watching that one person specific. Now, I disagree. That is not the best way to watch 10K. However, I do agree with the general sentiment that like within each race, there's a dozen storylines and ways people run it. And when you have a rooting interest in any race and watch one person because you're really interested in how they do, it does become significantly more interesting.
Exciting episode on Run DNA podcast here with Kyle Merber about how to be a track fan and what that means. And we share Kyle's experience as a professional runner, and we learn about how he promotes the sport now and how he would change the sport to get more people to watch it, and some of my own thoughts about what we could do to change the sport to get more viewership. But I think we have so many runners, and there is each runner has a unique story, and the pros are no different. And if you want to follow it, it's a really fun, great community, really nice group of people. So if you're really looking to understand what is it like to be a fan of track and how you can get started with following results, we're going to introduce Kyle and go through some ways that you can get started being a fan of sport. It's something that I have really had the opportunity to get to know and appreciate Kyle as somebody that's helped me continue to be a fan of the sport. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. Hi, everyone. Doug Adams here from the Run DNA podcast. Really excited about our interview today with Kyle Merber. We're really excited to talk all things nerdy about running and really getting into the pro world here. So if you're enjoying this content, please listen to our other podcasts as well as check out our newsletter if you want more detailed about running injuries and running performance. So check us out there. But in the meantime, I'd love to introduce Kyle. Kyle has a great past with running and a really bright future with it as well, which is really fun. He's been on different aspects of it, accomplished runner at all levels, but really specialized in middle distance events, starting in high school, but also you were at Columbia, and then you ran in your pro career, you ran for the New Jersey, New York Track Club, which had affiliations with Hoka, I believe, as well there. So had his time in the professional field and set records all the way up to world records with the DMR relay there. Was that 2015? Did I get that right?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a minute, but still amazing there. That very cool. And, I think really we retired in 2021, correct?
The pandemic retired me.
The pandemic retired you there? Yeah.
Sometime 2020, 2021.
It's all blurry, all those years blend together with a lot of that. But currently, really he's taken up a leadership role in all things running media. I read Kyle. This is fun for me because Kyle and I don't talk often, but I read his newsletter, so I feel like I talk to him. He's got this great newsletter, The Lap Count, and he does a great job of just really outlining everything going on in the sport. Great commentary, great editorial, but also providing just a lot of what's going on. I think we'll talk about this during this, but there's some challenges of following all the different running events happening, and that is just my source for all things running to keep up with everything. So we're definitely going to link to that, and I recommend everyone sign up for that Lap Count newsletter. That is a huge thing in my life that I just keep up with running, and that's how I stay a fan of running as well. But and he also works at Sidious Mag, and you're the director of partnerships, and really was employee one or early employees kind of coming on there, founding that. And they've got a bunch of great podcasts as well, and some blogs, and their social media. So if you're looking for somebody to follow or to help you to get involved with the sport of running and the professional level, Kyle is it. So thank you for being on, Kyle. Did I miss anything or anything else to add with that?
No, happy to be here. You're my number one referrer of the Lap Count. I could see that title. And so thank you for spreading the good word.
That's the only thing I'm number one in for running. So I'm really happy to say that I have a number one, right? That's my number one ranking there. I'll appreciate that. So I really do recommend it. It is a great newsletter. You guys do a great job writing it. There's so much detail, but there's also behind the scenes. And we were talking a little bit about this before. Running is such a great community, and there's such a great background story for every runner. And it's hard to learn that. And it can be challenging to realize like, oh, these people aren't just running around an oval. They're people, they've got great stories. And when you see what those events are leading up to it and why somebody ran the way they did, or I think there's so much more to the story that people can really get behind. And it being an Olympic year, I love it because that's when people care about track and field most, is Olympic year. So hopefully there's even more ways to get involved with running and following the sport there.
Yeah, we're trying to fill in the gaps there, get everyone interested more than once every 4 years. And, speaking of community, I think the big challenge is that there is a running community, whether that's on someone's like local level and the people that they run with on every day. But even like there's a whole network of influencers that have convinced people to go from couch to 5K that honestly, like I'm relatively unaware of, because there's the track community. And I think the issue ultimately is that these are two different communities. And, we're working to hopefully make that track and field community a little bit more accessible for those who have, dipped their toes in, they like the Olympics, they want to know what's going on in between. And so, Sidious Mag and then my newsletter, which is part of Sidious Mag, the lap count, is really ideally the entry point for people of like, if you don't know where to start, well, it's like, well, once a week, if you want to read a newsletter, I will tell you everything that you need to know. And then if you want to get deeper and deeper, Sidious has everything else.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that's exactly what we should be looking for. There's such a strong running community out there, but getting connected with the next level and seeing it, you ask a group of kids that play basketball, you're like, hey, name 5 NBA players for me. No problem. Right? You ask a cross-country team, name 5 pro runners for me, and you're not going to get nearly the same response that you do for basketball. That's a shame.
And I think that's an element of everyone who, not everyone, but a lot of people who run, it's a participatory event for themselves. Like it's something that they enjoy doing for their own, amusement and entertainment, but they don't necessarily look to others to fill that void. And I think the way that I consider the sport of track and field is it's like purely entertainment now. Like I am a fan. I watch it because I enjoy it. A lot of people take it very seriously. I take it as seriously as it needs to be, but really like it is fun. Like I enjoy sitting down at a track meet and watching races for a couple hours. But the thing that I enjoy most of all is then debating with friends what happened, what's going to happen, who we like, who we don't like. And I think that's an element of the sport that we need to continue to do a better job of, not just as media, but just as fans collectively. Is it treat it like a sport. Like, the pro athletes are not out there just seeing if they can run a 5K. They're trying to see how fast they can run a 5K. And it's not even about how fast, but can they run it faster than everyone else? Like it is a competition. And that is a lot different than those who are, going after a BQ or, just trying to run their first marathon. And so it's a different mindset and they often get conflated together, but they are two very different approaches, and being able to turn that on and off is an important aspect of being a track fan beyond just a runner.
I mean, it gives such perspective to the sport too. Is like a recreational runner that's nothing special as a runner, like just seeing what they do and the work that goes into it and how long it takes them. I mean, it's inspiring just to see what goes into it. I can't remember if I read this on Lap Count or if I read it somewhere else, but there was a soccer player that recently ran like 100 ran 100 meters, and they were like, oh, he's almost as fast as Usain Bolt. It's like, no, you'd be like the 1,000-something person in the world for your 100-meter. Like you're not that fast, but everyone thinks you're fast for soccer.
Yeah, we really do just need Christian Coleman to just do the 40-yard at the combine and just like end all conversations. People understand that, look, no one is going to suggest that these guys can go out and dribble a ball or kick it as fast as others. But like, if we're just talking about exploding out of the blocks, like it is a different world of speed. It's, specializing in one thing, you can get very, very good at it. So everyone always likes to make comparisons to other sports, and it gets traction and just throwing out Usain Bolt's name. But I mean, even still, like it's, the times that they're acting like are close are nowhere in the same realm, if the other is even legitimate.
No, it's completely off. So, all right, I want to come back to this, but first, I want the audience to get to know you a little bit more here, and I'm going to throw out a couple like quick ones there, just quick questions. I didn't prepare you for these at all, but just kind of some things, just like gut reactions, quick responses, and then I want to hear a little bit about your running career before we kind of go back to the sport of running and why everyone should be a fan. So, all right, we're looking up your results and things before. You have done pretty much every iconic race that there is, like that's
there's some missing, some key ones missing. But
well, there's some key ones missing, but you hit a lot of them. So, what was your favorite race? What was the favorite race you ever did?
I mean, for personal reasons, I put on a race called the Long Island Mile in my hometown for 5 years, and so we had a number of Olympians come out and race in front of the local community, and
that's fun.
Guys ran and women ran very, very fast, and so I would, in addition to hosting and playing meet director, would race it myself, and that was always special, although I was always exhausted.
Yeah, I'm sure just doing all of those different duties at the same time is a little tough there. So, so then along those same lines, this might be the same answer then, like proudest running accomplishment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is something I'm very proud of because it kind of combines the two. The reason I was able to do it was because of, what I had done on the track, and, required a little bit of business prowess as well. And, but, I think just my personal best in the 1500, I feel like I won the race, and in my head, I could go faster if in a different opportunity, but it was just like the day that everything went perfect and really
all clicked.
And it's kind of, like I'm a 1500 guy. Like that was, we measure what the best day of your life was. And that was the best day of my life, apparently.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's fun. All right. You said you could watch track and field forever. What's your favorite event? Like, what are you most excited to watch? Like, what is the event that you're like, I can't wait to watch this?
Yeah, it's always the 15. I feel like
15.
But I know I'm biased, but I also think it's the perfect combination of strength and speed and tactics. And certain races, you just know who's going to win beforehand. Whereas the very, very best, which we've seen in recent years, can still be beaten. And that just, to me, is the most exciting aspect, is that unknown.
The 15 is fun. Like, I don't think it's just your bias there. Like, that is an event when I'm there, like, I will always watch the 15. I normally have somebody racing in it, but at the same point, it's fun. And we just had the 1500 for the recent Indoor Worlds was just a phenomenal race. That was, so anyone would love, whether you like track and field or not, it was such a great race to watch there.
Yeah, and then got to give ups to the 100 as well. Just see who's the fastest.
That one is just to see how quick somebody can actually go with that. It's seeing it live too. We'll get to this later, but I think there is something to seeing it live. Watching it on TV is one thing, and it's great to follow it in the absence of the ability to see it live. But man, you just see how quick they're moving. You're like, how is that humanly possible?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the other aspect of going to see things live, in addition to just being able to appreciate the athletes, especially for like someone who's getting into it, is you realize how many diehard fans there are out there. Yeah, and it's a good way to be exposed to like the depth and the amount of community that is behind the entire sport,
which is really cool. Yeah. All right, craziest thing you've seen or experienced on a run?
I mean, I got hypothermia once during a race. So it was the Ivy League championships. And at the beginning of the race, it was like 34 degrees and raining, and it turned to sleet, and it turned to snow. And I mean, my body locked up there, finished, collapsed into the snow, had to go to the hospital and get that taken care of until I warmed up. So
yeah, that's pretty wild day.
It's up there.
Yeah. All right. And the last one before we kind of talk a little bit more of their stuff. One thing you never leave home without when you go on a run.
Oh, I mean, I always wear a watch, and I kind of hate that. I wish that I could just I know how far it is from my house. Like, I know these loops.
You didn't record it. It didn't happen though.
But I'm so obsessed with knowing, which probably when I was competing was not beneficial. Probably was overly obsessed with the numbers and the splits. And even still now, it's like, why? It doesn't matter how fast I'm running. I'm just doing it for fun. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, a watch.
Yeah.
And a hat. You know what? I would throw a hat in there because a watch is probably a common answer. I'm always a hat runner.
Yeah. I was going to say, most of the pictures I've seen of you, you have a hat on.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you would say hat or watch. I would
always run with a hat.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of forced to as a ball guy. I burn my head if I don't have a hat on a lot of times, but watch is definitely probably for me. I'm a wearable addict with that kind of stuff there, just nature of my profession. But so, you know, I'd love to hear more. We've had pros on and we talk about it, and we're talking about following track and field. And a lot of times the professional runners can't always speak as candidly about what it's like to be a professional runner because they're under contract or they've got obligations and they're in the middle of their season, they're racing, they have to be cheery about how everything's going. But like, what's it like being a pro runner? You know, what was your experience like?
It's both the hardest job and the easiest job simultaneously. You know, at most places of work, there can be more than one winner. You win as a team. Whereas in track, you know, it's either you win or you lose. Most of the time, most people lose. And so, you know, it's tough in that regard. It's a lot of pressure, which makes it hard. And every single thing that you do is built up to one specific event and one thing that may be months off. And so you have to be very long-term focused, but on a day-to-day basis, it's pretty wonderful. I mean, I think of like the best years of my life where like living in a house with 6 other professional runners, all on the same schedule. I ran every mile with someone. We ate every meal together, you know, and it was a great routine. There's a lot of hard work, but you're doing it with friends and you really get to enjoy the downtime with others as well. I don't watch as much TV as I used to. And so it's interesting because it is really fun on a day-to-day basis, but then also like you will never have more anxiety than in, I think, this career path or, you know, in sports in general. And then it's just it's either going so well or so poorly, and rarely is it in between.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of highs and lows. And I mean, one of the things just working with a lot of pro athletes, I just feel like the sport has such challenges there because you're physically exerting yourself so much that you actually wear down your central nervous system and you have stress. So the stressors of racing and running, when you're running low week 70, high week 100 miles a week or so, it's so fatiguing on the body that you are prone to have those emotional highs and lows. I mean, I get grumpy after a 10-mile run on the weekend. You know, I get the run hanger issues. I could imagine that's your easy run for the day. So there's a lot of challenge in that.
It is very interesting too, because being some level of hurt was just part of my life for a decade.
Yeah.
And even when running, you know, plenty of miles and racing well, you still wake up in the morning and those first steps are not good. And I just assumed that was going to be the rest of my life until I retired. And I realized that's not the way the rest of the world lives. Like, not everyone has to spend 20 minutes warming up their Achilles each morning.
Yeah.
And so you are constantly reminded and you can't shut that off. I think, especially when you're actually hurt, you know, every single thing that you do that comes with you. If you have a stress reaction in your sacrum, which I've had, that means like you can't do anything. Like you can't put pants on with that without being reminded of how shitty your job is currently going. So, I mean, that's one element that I think is often overlooked, is just like the actual physical toll on your body. You're always sore, you're always tired. And the other, I slept terrible, and I thought I just had some insomnia. Like I saw some people about it even once, and just turned out like now I was just really stressed about my job all the time.
Yeah.
So I sleep a lot better now.
That's good. Good. Sleep is important. Sleep's like the number one performance enhancing activity. And it's so challenging that you can't sleep well. And that's common. Like, right. I've worked with a lot of athletes that have said the same thing, where they just can't sleep well and they're fatigued. And it's really a vicious cycle, because you just need to get a really good night's sleep, but you can't. And that constant reminder, like you're talking about, a lot of times, I think all levels of runners, recreational or professional, are really, the way I describe injuries is like wearing shaded glasses. If you're wearing yellow tinted glasses, the whole world looks yellow. You're like, oh, everything. When you have an injury, the whole world is like, is that going to aggravate my shin pain? Is this going to affect, like, I can't go see a movie right now? Like, I injured my sacrum. Like, come on, I need to be able to at least watch a movie or something. I'm supposed to be resting.
And that's the hard part about running, is you just can't shut it off. And that's, you know, in all aspects, healthy or injured, good or bad, is every decision you make is ultimately impacting whether or not you achieve your goal. And that, you know, if you think too deeply about that, then, you know, that's a lot of extra burden on, you know, something you're already struggling and dealing with as well. So look, I always say that being a professional runner was the best way to spend your 20s. Like, it was really fun. I will also say that now when I'm at meets and I'm watching athletes warm up or, you know, do strides before the race, no aspect of me is jealous.
Yeah. You've been there, done that. Got the t-shirt. Now move on there. Yeah.
Happy to be on the other side.
But your flip side of like the benefit is also really true about the almost fraternity like bond that you have with your colleagues there, where you're so close with them because you eat, drink, sleep, like you're all on the same rhythm. It's funny. It's like I often have said, it's a fraternity that goes to bed at 9:30. Like, that's what a running club or a professional running team is. It's like, yep, they're not doing the same other activities. They go to bed at 9:30, but they're like a fraternity or sorority almost day in and day out. They spend all their time together, which is a cool aspect that not a lot of people get.
Yeah, I mean, not that we're going to war, you know, much less dramatic than that.
Yeah.
But it's a similar bond that you would see. And, you know, that's especially deep with teammates, especially in college. But even like your contemporaries, those that you're racing against, maybe they're wearing a different uniform and they're in their own training group, but you still have that mutual respect and understanding. And I think that's part of the reason why we probably don't talk as much smack as they do in some other sports. Is there, and also you can always get beat. That's probably the other thing, is like, it is the most humbling of sports, and no one will be at the top forever. So
yeah, that's the challenge with it. So, I mean, going back to your injury experience a little bit, because I found an article, and I'm obviously running gait analysis is kind of my life, and that's what I do. But I found an article where you were dealing with an injury, and you use things like gait analysis to help you get back, and you did other things. So, what did you learn as a pro about dealing with injuries that you even carry over now, and you've learned with your own recreational running, or if you were coaching or telling people? Like, what key lessons did you learn about dealing with injuries?
Yeah, you know, I think I've got a lot of lessons, and I haven't had to think about them in a while. But,
which is good.
Yeah, you know, I think the big thing is that everything is connected, and there is a butterfly effect. And so, you know, when I think about my career as a whole, I was invincible until entering my junior year of college. Like, did not deal with anything, was 100% healthy, which is common for most, you know, kids. And then I stepped on a piece of glass on a run, and it went through the shoe, and it tore the flexor tendon in my foot. And that set off like a chain reaction that I have dealt with for the rest of my life. I think it just suddenly created a bunch of imbalances. I had to take 6-7 months off of running, and then in coming back, you know, there were aspects of my gait that were different, and my arm swing had changed, and you know, this led to that, and then you just it's just forever I was dealing with this. And that idea then translates to everything always in sport. So if your foot hurts, well, you know, it's not going to stay isolated to your foot. Before you know it, your knee is going to hurt. And before you know it, your hip is going to hurt. And oftentimes that's why athletes have to go speak with professionals, because it's like, hey, like, this is bothering me. Let's treat this. And that's what the athlete focuses on. And sometimes you need that outside perspective to work down the chain and see where it's actually stemming from and address that underlying issue. So I spent a lot of my career backtracking, trying to figure out what was wrong. Unfortunately, I think it all began at that one moment. And I did my best to contain it and adjust along the way.
Yeah. So would you do anything different? Like if you were advising young Kyle when you injured your foot, like would you tell young Kyle to do something differently? Or
Yeah. So I think there's a few aspects. Obviously, like don't take that step would have been great advice.
Would have been the best one.
I would have had endless numbers of Olympic medals in my head.
Of course.
No, but yeah, it's a perfect built-in excuse. No, but in reality, I think the thing I wish I could have done differently is to be willing to take that day off and be willing to separate myself from the group. And while training partners is an amazing benefit and living with a bunch of other professional runners and teammates throughout my career was always great, you get serious FOMO in having to take that day. And I'm a runner's runner. Like I love the process. I love training. I don't need to race in order to enjoy going for runs. And so for me, if something was bothering me, if I was not going to be able to join the entire team for a 10-mile run, let alone a workout, that was difficult to come to grips with. And I think, there's probably years of my career that maybe I would have been better off had I been training by myself, because I was always trying to keep up with others rather than listening to my body. And ultimately, like that responsibility falls on you. Like coach doesn't know exactly what you're going to feel like on that warm up. It takes your ability to speak up and to be courageous and say, hey, like that 20 minutes did not feel good. I'm just going to call it today.
Yeah.
And so, the lessons is be willing to back off when you need to. And I think I would have been able to manage things a lot better.
We did the first episode we did on this was all just saying like, hey, guess what? Running and injuries are synonymous there. Like admit that you have it earlier and just be willing to say like, I'm going to address this now. So it doesn't hurt. Like you're exactly right. Everything's connected. Address it at the start and don't let it become something else that you're going to have to unwrap later.
It's funny because I'm currently, as we're recording this podcast, dealing with like my first injury since retiring. I've had no issues because if something popped up one day, I just took the next day off and I'm fine. And I had a week and a half ago, I'm sure you can tell me how wrong this is, but so I get a lot of shoes from brands just because of my role, and everyone sends me super shoes. No one ever just sends me trainers, it seems. So I have way too many super shoes.
You got to run fast all the time.
Everything has a plate in it. And I think basically what happened was like my calf got tight and, my shins got tight. And ultimately like I had a run in which my knee was bothering me. It wasn't the end of the world. Like my knee was bothering me a little bit. It was a little sore. And then the next day, a friend came over. He came to the house just to run with me. And walking around that morning, my knee was fine. If he wasn't at my house specifically to run, 30 seconds of that run, I would have called it. Yeah. But it was a friend I hadn't seen in a bit and who was there for me. So I gutted out a very painful run and, now my knee hurts. And so, I just didn't think anything of it at the time. I knew it probably meant I was going to have to take a couple of days, but it's social. It's no longer a sport for me. So at the time I was willing to do the sacrifice. And now, 10 days later, I'm kicking myself of like, did we not learn anything? Yeah. So here we are.
Yeah. So the moral of the story is like always be in your own decision about whether it's the right time to train or not here. But it is hard.
No more friends, I think, is the
no more friends. Yeah. It's social, just run in the dark and, nobody will ever know that you're there and that you can run as slow as you need to. And
probably less super shoes. That's the other takeaway.
Yeah, we could have a whole conversation about super shoes, and I think we will have some. Actually, we've got Nathan Brown coming on, and we're going to talk about some of that stuff eventually here too, because it is an interesting thing, just understanding that we don't have a lot of equipment in running, right? You've got your shoes and your shorts and your hat and your watch, basically, but the shoes do have a big impact on what you do. And not all shoes are created equal and not all people respond the same way to the same shoe. We've done a ton of gait analysis with comparing people in one pair of shoes versus another. Same runner, 10 seconds later, very different running style based off the shoe. And our body doesn't get a memo. It's like, hey, guess what? Now you're overstriding, or nope, now your right hip's dropping because this shoe has a wider lateral flare. Like, you don't get that memo, and it's really hard there.
I mean, I have one pair of shoes that I absolutely love. Like when I run in them, I am having so much fun. Like just the bounce is unreal. But I do know that it's like not necessarily my form when I'm in them, which is fine. You know, you can adjust and you can get stronger in those weak points that are now being corrected by it. But like, it's probably a part of the reason why I'm dealing with something is I got a new pair of shoes that I loved and, you know, just decided to go all in on it rather than easing into things, despite knowing that these super shoes might be a little more aggressive than I am built for.
Yeah, they all impact us very differently too. I think it's an interesting evolution of the sport, and we've seen, you know, some will speculate, you know, its contribution to wildly faster times and our ability to do things and better ability to recover so we can train better. And there's lots of things that we could say with them. But at the end of the day, everyone needs to figure out if that's the right shoe for them and really be able to understand, is this affecting me in a way? And like you said, you can do it sometimes. It's not that we're saying you should never run into them, but do you run them once a week? Do you run them once every a month? Do you run races in them? Like, you have to figure that out based off of your own flexibility, strength, running form, runner experience. All those things matter for it.
Yeah, I messed up, which, you know, I deal with the consequences. But again, like, now it's fine. You know, it's just like, I feel a little out of shape for a couple of weeks, as opposed to, you know, my career falling apart. It's not.
If you're in the middle of your career stage and you're like, I need to get my qualifier for Olympic trials and I need to be in good shape right now, and what every other runner is going through at the time of recording here.
Yeah, I mean, now, like do as I say, not as I do. But like, I'm not stretching. I'm not getting the PT going. I'm not doing it because I just have less urgency now. And now after a week and a half, I'm like, all right, I might have to get the bands out. Like, it might be time, to get to. I know what I'm supposed to do. I've learned. I've done it all before. I just thought I never had to do it again. But now it might be.
Well, I tell you what, if I assume you're going to Penn Relays, right?
I actually won't be.
No,
we'll have some people there, but not myself.
I was going to say, come down and we'll do a gait analysis and we'll check it out. And because I'm right near there, like, come down, we'll take a look at it here. And because that's the thing, like what you said is, you know, you could have this knee pain and you might be able to, your body will find a way to get around it. And you're like, oh, I'm back running. But you really changed. Now you're utilizing a hip strategy or a calf strategy, and you're utilizing those more. And now in 6 weeks, you're like, why does my back hurt? Because you've changed your form with it there. It really is an important thing that you check out, especially if you have an injury. You need to check up on those things. But I'm biased. I'm the gait guy with that stuff there. So, but I think it's important to check it out. So
no, you are right.
Yeah, if you do get down, come on down. We'll do a game analysis. We'll check it out there. So, so let's go back to talking about track and field for a second here. And I'm going to give you like a little hypothetical. I'd love to hear what you would do in this scenario. So all of a sudden, you're put as the head of track and field, and you are in charge. You're the czar of all things track and field, right? What's the first thing you would do that you would think would significantly advance the sport?
I would probably, I'd probably consolidate to one streaming service would be the first thing.
Okay, I like that.
Like, we're so disjointed and all over the place. If you get NBA TV, you know you're going to see all the NBA games. It's like, imagine if you had to download 30 different subscriptions and pay for 30 different things depending on what team you wanted to watch. Yeah. So I think that is first and foremost. And then the other thing, I mean, like, as we move to streaming, we do see continually that, like, there is just value in being on cable still. Like
Yeah.
it is undeniable that we get way more viewership when on television versus a streaming platform. And I think that would be the case no matter who the streaming partner is. So I do still think like continuing to meet people with where they're at.
And what about a rule change? If you were to change one rule or do something, what would you change to help the sport that way?
Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of there's many ideas. I often say that like I'd get rid of a ton of events,
Yeah.
both like actual disciplines as well as meets. I think part of the issue is that there's too much going on in every sense. There's too many athletes, there's too many events, there's too many meets. How is one person supposed to follow all this stuff? And I think part of that issue is that we don't have a defined term for who is professional and who is not. And so, anything can be a professional meet quite easily. And so, I think something that I would do is have a stricter schedule, which we see already is like an issue as World Athletics has kind of dipped their toe into having like the official World Athletics calendar. So for those who don't know, now like meets basically have to be put on this official calendar. And if they're not like paying the fee, the certification, then that the marks that athletes set there will not count for rankings or their official marks and world, whatever it is. And so, we kind of dipped our toes into it and it's a little bit of a disaster, but I would maybe go a step further and make it way more strict of like, these are the 20 meets that exist and that is it. And like, if you're not at one of those 20 meets, then you're not qualifying for anything.
I like that too, because that would make those meets bigger and then people could come and watch them and be aware of them. And there's less to follow. Like you said, it's like, I don't follow baseball because there's a game going on all the time. Like I don't have time to follow all of these things. Track and field, there's a lot of events. And I was like, oh, who's running today?
Yeah, it's impossible. So, I mean, my idea would basically be that you would still have like a main program TV window. So, we're on NBC for 2 hours and it's like the Diamond League, which I think is a great product. Like I love watching the TV window of a Diamond League, but in my like made up scenario, you would also have an extensive pre-program or, the following day. And that's essentially your minor leagues of the athletes who are trying to earn their way into the main program. Their times would still count for rankings and this and that because it's all organized under the same umbrella. But ultimately, it's not just, and I say this after telling you about the Long Island Mile. So, but it's like, it's not just like a random high school track that we're just popping up at and pretending that this time is equivalent to performing in the actual big leagues. Just because it's almost like as if LeBron James went out to a local playground and scored 50 points and added that to his stat sheet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not regulated enough that way. My athletic background was much more in triathlon. So I raced triathlons for like 17 years. Like technically I was a pro for one race kind of thing, but like very, very technically. But I was amazed with how people were so involved with it, and everything was like sanctioned as well with that, even at the amateur level. And it's very organized of like, hey, this is how you qualify for regionals and this is how you qualify there. And I think at the professional level, there's even more organization needed. And I think it's interesting that if you ask, there's 50 million runners, and how many members of USA Track and Field versus, something like everybody that competes in a triathlon is a member of USA Triathlon, or at least has a temporary license there.
Yeah, ultimately, like the governing body is not, the all powerful governing body that you need them to be. And I know that people are generally like scared to hand over immense amounts of power to one entity, especially if they have not proven themselves 100% competent in all things. But you end up having so many people who are invested, so many organizations that are invested on different sides. And so they all are working towards their own goals. So, think of USATF And like immediately people go like, oh, USATF, they're not good for the sport. It's like, well, what do you mean? Like they fill out every single team
Yeah.
to every single world championships and Olympics, and they come away with the most medals possible. Like, how do you possibly say that USATF is not doing good? Like, obviously something is working,
Yeah.
but well, why are we putting this governing federation whose job it is to fill the team in charge of marketing the sport? That shouldn't be their job. Like that should be on someone else.
Yeah.
And so everyone's operating in their own lane, and no one has enough money or enough resources or enough control to like take full ownership. And so we just have everyone trying their best, but having differing goals.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It's a great point about USA Track and Field. Like it depends on their mission and their goal. If their mission is to earn medals and to do that, like 100%, they're crushing it. They're super successful with that. And can or should that organization be the same one that's promoting it across the recreational, or promoting it, marketing it, as you said? Like that's a really valid point about that.
That's like an ongoing issue with USATF as well, as because they oversee the youth and the master and trail and every aspect of the sport. It's arguably it should be 4 or 5 different organizations, and instead it all falls under one umbrella. On the topic of like marketing and getting, popularizing the sport, I think that's where Sidious Mag tries to come in, and, it's like allow certain governing bodies to do what they're doing and allow us to hopefully grow and continue to grow to the point where we're the ones sending the message to fans and grabbing potential fans and pulling them into the sport. So, it's also an opportunity.
Oh, yeah. Hey, if somebody's doing too much, somebody can sweep in and help out and promote the sport, which is great because there are so many runners. Like the volume is a huge attractiveness to it. So I got one rule change, and I want to hear your thoughts on this and let me know. I want to go full on like Formula One with the jerseys. Remove there's a rule that you can only have one logo on your jersey, and it's like, why are we limiting ourselves that these teams who are strapped for cash have no ability? Like the guys are all getting individual sponsorships from, chocolate milk people. Like, why don't we let the teams get more sponsorships type thing? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that aspect of it.
Yeah. I mean, I fully agree. I mean, part of the issue is that the governing bodies have their own set of sponsors and their own rules. And, the shoe companies are heavily invested in their athletes, and they don't necessarily all want to share space. And so I do agree that it makes sense. But even more so, while that might bring some dollars in, it doesn't necessarily bring reach. We need to make sure that fans first know where to watch races and are able to watch races and when to watch races. And then, those values will, hopefully skyrocket as the viewership goes up. But I do completely agree. I mean, I wrote in the lap count this morning that athletes should, it's an individual sport. Let's, rather than fighting that, let's embrace it a little bit and use it as an opportunity to show a little bit more individual expression. Like, why is everyone's uniform the same? Why is every Nike athlete's uniform exactly the same? It seems ridiculous sometimes that you'll watch a Diamond League race and all 12 athletes will have the same exact uniform. And then you're doing like an eagle eye view of the race. How is anyone supposed to discern who is who? Yeah. And so I think rather than forcing everyone to look like clones, it's like an opportunity to design your own uniform. The segment that I had said is the easiest thing is adding numbers to a uniform.
Pick the numbers. If
everyone's gonna have the same Nike or Adidas uniform, then you might as well throw some numbers on the back and a name, like every other sport, and we can be able to pick them out a little bit better, as opposed to having to read names.
Right, you're telling your kids watching it, hey, number 4, right? That's Eric Holt. He's running, and he picked that number because he's got 4 letters in his first and last name type thing. It's like, I liked your explanation of why they actually picked the numbers. That was pretty cool too.
Yeah. So, I just think, and then there are certain athletes, and you see with like Noah Lyles, and
Yeah.
carry, who fashion is a huge part of their identity and who they are and what they like outside of the sport. And it's a way for fans to connect with them. How come when they step on the track, we are limiting them to wearing the same thing as everyone else? So, it might as well also throw 8 more sponsors on there as well.
Right. Just, full Formula One NASCAR style, just, temporary tattoos on the forehead, running a race type thing, go for it.
Yeah. Well, I think to your Formula One point, something that is always interesting is there's 20 drivers in Formula One, right? And there's a 21st driver who might be better than one of those 20, and we don't let him in the circuit.
Yeah.
And in track, we're so obsessed with like equal opportunity to everyone, and whoever is the best can always, and rather than having to earn your way up as if like one performance in and of itself is always enough to qualify you to be able to race anyone, anytime, ever. And so I do think that having a little bit more of a system in place of who's racing who, like, would it be better or worse if times were faster, but the same 10 people always raced each other? And like, you really got to know those 10 people. Or is it better to just say like, no, the goal is to see who's the fastest, and that's the only goal.
Right.
And part of me thinks like, no, the goal is entertainment. Like, I'm trying to have fun here.
Oh yeah.
I don't really care. But if there's another guy on the bench who no one's ever heard of might have been able to win, I'd rather,
that one race, but he couldn't run the next 5 that way. Yeah. I'd love to see like a league or a series or something like that, which would be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. So again, it's like that element is like, are we trying to just see who's the fastest in the world, or are we trying to put out the best product and create the most entertainment? And I think at the Olympics, we're trying to see who's the fastest in the world. At the World Championships, we're trying to see who's the fastest in the world. Outside of that, like, let's have fun. Like, let's try. Yeah. I don't think the entire season should be designed around seeing who's the fastest person. In the world every 4 years. Like, there's plenty of other space.
It's such an objective sport, which is a challenge. I agree that like some subjectivity, arguing who's the best and who would win in a matchup of this, like, would add a lot to the sport, because I see the runners are always obsessed of like, I need to hit this time, or I need to get this amount of points. And that's all they're concerned about.
Yeah. And it's very formulaic in that regard. But then at the same time, whenever you do try to promote anything, you get pushback. It seems like again, like, I'm a runner, so I feel like I'm allowed to insult us, but like, runners can be very sensitive and very protective, and like, that's not fair. And so, just yesterday it's announced that Jakob Ingebrigtsen and Josh Kerr are going to race at the Prefontaine Mile. It's a huge deal. The Olympic champion versus the reigning world champ, who've both been talking into the media and, about how they're going to beat the other person back and forth for what seems like ever now. And so they're finally going to race each other. Like, that is the race. That is the promotion for sure. Like, it's a head to head. And then you, of course, get what about Yared and Goose?
Yeah, I was going to say, Yared's doing that race too. And don't sleep on Yared for that race either.
But that's the thing, is it's like, yes, Yared is in the race, but the storyline is not Yared. The storyline is Jakob versus Josh. And that doesn't mean that on race day, like, Yared might not win. And I think like, in analysis and discussion and debate, it's like a good point. But like Sidious, we made a poster, like an old school boxing poster for the race, and it's like, no, like, the headline, like, story here is Josh versus Jakob, and like that's gonna sell better than like, well, what about Yared? Well, it's like, all right, well, like, what about Cam Myers? What about Jake Whiteman? What about, it's like, you can always add one more to the conversation, but like, from a strict promotional standpoint, simplifying things and just like,
the head to head
is the verse. And if someone else comes in, then it's an exciting upset. I don't know. So everyone is obviously very protective, and that's not the athletes. That's fans. That's the fans who get that way.
That's awesome. Well, I want to be respectful of time and really appreciate you being on here. So what, just kind of closing remarks, and feel free to, like, I'm going to promote Lap Count and Sidious Mag here and say, like, I follow them. So if you were going to give advice on how people can get started with being a fan, where would you start? What would be the first thing that you would tell somebody here's how to be a fan of running?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest thing, in addition to obviously, subscribing and following the stuff that I do, you got to watch the races. But on top of watching the races, which if you can find them, then, I know that everyone will watch them. Get to know the athletes, like by following them on social media, but listening to their post-race interviews. Oftentimes on TV, if you're lucky, you get a 20-second interview with the race winner. On YouTube, you will get 10 minutes of like the top 5 in the field talking about the race and, where it fits into their season. And you see a little bit more personality and rooting interest there. So, attaching yourself to a few athletes that really resonate with you. And then finally is like, find the friends to argue about things with and to get excited about with, because that is the best part. Like, racing's fun. I like watching it, but like the most fun thing is the speculation.
That is fun. Yeah, getting to know it. And when you get to know them, their personalities are so great. And you can learn so much more about a race, about like what happened. Like, you just watch it and you don't really know exactly what happened until you start hearing those post-race interviews like, oh man, so-and-so win. And it was right after I just surged and I didn't have the surge. And you kind of start to get the tactics and understand there's a lot to it, more than just running in a circle as fast as you can.
Yeah, I have a friend whose point I disagree with, but he said the best way to watch, I like sort of disagree with, but the best way to watch a 10K is to watch it, once again and again for every person in the field and watching that one person specifically. Now, I disagree. That is not the best way to watch 10K. Most 10Ks don't need to be watched more than once.
No.
However, I do agree with the general sentiment that like within each race, there is a dozen storylines and ways people run it. And when you have a rooting interest in any race and watch one person because you're really interested in how they do, and you watch the race through their lens, it does become significantly more interesting. And you realize like all the little moves that are being made in the strategies and where they went right versus where they went wrong.
Yeah, it is cool. There's a lot to it. So, well, Kyle, thank you for all you do for the sport and getting it out there. And thanks for being on. What's, I don't think we listed, what's your social media for people to follow that as well as out in Sidious Mag?
The Real Merb on Twitter. And then, Kyle Merber on Instagram, but you're really only going to see pictures of my daughter.
Yeah, that's right.
Good content.
Yeah. Good content. As a dad, like that's all I pretty much put out too.
For track content, Twitter, newsletter, Sidious Mag.
Perfect. Well, Kyle, really appreciate you being on. So thanks so much for the time here. And if you make your way down to Philly anytime, let me know. We'll do a gait analysis. I hope the knee gets better for you.
Will do. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Like what you hear? Leave a review of the show wherever you listen, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Run DNA helps runners and running specialists through education and technology to identify each runner's unique injury profile to avoid setbacks and maximize results. The Run DNA podcast is produced by Ace Running LLC. The Run DNA podcast is intended for educational purposes only. No clinical decision-making should be based solely on one source. While care is taken to ensure accuracy, factual errors can occur. Always seek the guidance of qualified medical professionals before making healthcare decisions. Find us online at rundna.com.